Greetings. I'm Mary Schaefer, Editorial Director for Accounts Payable Now and Tomorrow, and the author of The Controller and CFO's Guide to Accounts Payable and 15 other business books, many of which are focused on the accounts payable function. I'm here today to spend a few minutes with you talking about the master vendor file. Master vendor file is something that in many organizations doesn't get the attention that it deserves, and as the accounts payable function advances and becomes more sophisticated, if you will, or more integrated into the whole financial process, it's becoming more and more important. So before I dive in, let me just review very briefly what we're going to talk about today in the few minutes we're going to spend together. I'm going to start off by giving you a brief definition about what I mean by master vendor file. Then I'm going to explain why I think, at least, using best practices are so important and why every organization should be using them. Then I'm going to tell you what the best practices are, and hopefully you'll agree, and that'll be that. So let's start off by what do I mean by the master vendor file. First of all, not everybody calls it the master vendor file the way I do. Some folks call it the vendor master file, some call it the vendor data file, and occasionally you'll see it abbreviated as MVF, and I'll probably use that definition a few times during the brief time we're going to spend together. The master vendor file, if we want to take a high-level business definition, is the repository for all information about all our vendors that our company or organization does business with. And that's a definition from the Controller and CFO's Guide to Accounts Payable. So why does everybody make such a big deal about master vendor files? Or especially why am I making such a big deal about it? Because if we employ best practices, some of the best practices that we're going to talk about going down the next few slides, it will, for starters, make the cleanup of the master vendor file easier. And this cleanup should be going on a very regular basis. We'll talk more about that. It will also, and this should be something near and dear to everybody's heart, make the making of duplicate payments more difficult. It will reduce the number of duplicate payments that your organization might have. When you have a vendor set up more than once in the master vendor file, and a supplier sends you sends a second invoice, and you've already paid that first invoice, if there are two entries in the master vendor file, when your processor goes to pay that second invoice, they may end up hitting on the second vendor listing, and that invoice may get paid. So cleaning up our master vendor file will help us reduce duplicate payments. Unfortunately for many of us, our employees know where our weak links are. Now, most employees won't steal from you or won't play games with your books, but there are a few out there who will. And if you have poor master vendor file practices, it just makes it a little bit easier for these employees to play those games. Good master vendor file practices, such as we're going to talk about, will make collecting W-9s easier, and this is becoming increasingly an important function within the corporate arena. I will acknowledge that corporate reporting didn't pass, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be collecting W-9s and getting that taxpayer information about our vendors. And finally, if you're a public company, good master vendor files will demonstrate stronger internal controls and will help you with your SOX compliance. So let's get started. Let's delve right into what are these best practices that I'm talking about? What should you be doing? The number one best practice, and this will help with a lot of other things, but is that you need to establish a naming convention that will be used when entering data. This naming convention should conform to the conventions that hopefully you've established for entering invoice data, like the invoice number, or entering vendor information when you're processing invoices, and if you accept invoices without invoice numbers, for the creation of invoice numbers to be put in your system as you process those invoices. So what exactly do I mean by a naming convention? This is a set of rules that define how vendor information will be entered into your master vendor file. It does address the minutia of the issue. Now, a lot of times with our employees, we want to encourage creativity, But I have to tell you, when it comes to processing invoices and entering data, you don't want to encourage creativity. You want everybody to do exactly what you tell them to do, and you want everybody to do the same thing. And I know this sounds a little bit controlling, but if we want to avoid fraud, duplicate payments, we want to have strong internal controls, this is one area where we have to insist that everybody do things exactly the same in the way we say, as as controlling as I said as that might be. When I talk about a naming convention for the master vendor file, I'm talking about addressing some of the minutiae such as abbreviations, punctuation, spaces, and how you would identify the names of individuals who might be in your master vendor file. So the traditional example that demonstrates a lot of these issues is IBM. Are we going to enter IBM as International Business Machines? Are we going to enter it as IBM? Are we going to enter it as I.B.M. Are we going to enter it as I space B space M? Each of these will show up as a different entry in the master vendor file. So without a set of rules as how we want our processes to enter this, we could end up with 4 or 5 entries for this very one company. When it comes to individuals, we want to address how we're going to enter their names. Do we want to enter their names, for example, my name? My name's Mary S. Schaefer. Do we want to enter me as Mary S. Schaefer? Do we want to enter it as Mary Schaefer? Or do we want to enter it as Schaefer Mary? Or perhaps Schaefer Mary S.? None of these are wrong. You just need to select one way to do it, and then everybody needs to do it the same. Now, when it comes to individual names, my preference, and I could spend 10 minutes explaining why, is to have last name first and then the first name. So I would enter it, if I was setting up the rules, as Schaefer Mary S. But again, if you decide you want to go with the first name, last name approach, it's not wrong as long as everybody's doing it the same. Let's talk now a minute about our master vendor file and cleansing, and what I mean by cleansing and how often we should do it. When we talk about cleansing the master vendor file, what we mean is going in and deactivating those vendors that we have not had any activity with, typically within the last year. Some folks will go 14 months, some folks will go 18 months. But generally, and that will depend upon, by the way, what your business is and the nature of your business, but typically 12 months is what's taken. I personally like 14 months because sometimes you'll have annual vendors who may not get paid exactly on time. So one year you may pay them in 11 months. The next year you may pay them in 13 months. But whatever you decide, you need to review your vendors, and you need to make sure that they are anyone who has you've not had any activity with whatever that given time period is deactivated. If you have not been using a naming convention, you might want to establish your naming convention and then go through and make sure all your vendors are entered according to this naming convention. If you've never either cleansed the master vendor file or perhaps standardized your names, the first time you do it, it will be a real nightmare. I'm not going to lie, it won't be pretty, it won't be easy, but it's worth doing. It can save you on many fronts, and once you get it done the first time, then when you do it each year, it will be easier than it was that first time. So when we talk about cleansing the master vendor file, people will say, well, who should do it? And our instinct is, or many people's instinct is okay, let's go out and hire a temp. We'll get a temp in to do this. Or perhaps when you have a new employee and before you start them on their regular tasks, you'll have them do this for you. The other thing that we see sometimes happen is an organization will take an employee who everybody likes but just can't seem to do a good job anyplace. They'll put them on cleansing the master vendor file. Let me say that all of these are bad ideas. The person that you want to go through to cleanse your master vendor file, to see which vendors perhaps you haven't done business with, which vendors perhaps should be put together if you've never done a standardizing of your naming, is somebody who knows your business. So unfortunately, I don't think this is a task that we can turn over to a temp. So now that we've spent just a few minutes in doing a very kind of high-level overview of master vendor files, let me ask you, how do your master vendor file practices stack up? Are they good? I'm Mary Schaefer, and I'd like to invite you, if you'd like, to sign up for our free weekly e-zine. I talk about master vendor files there, and I talk about some other accounts payable issues. The link is on your screen, www.ap-now.com. I'd love to have you join us. And if, for instance, you're interested in more information on master vendor files, as we addressed, this mini webinar was just a small part of a longer presentation that I do on handling vendors and accounts payable. We periodically present it in the online webinar format, and we have it available for purchase on CD. So if you want details of the agenda, go to the link that is shown. And again, I'd like to thank you for spending some time with us and invite you to sign up for a free e-zine. This short presentation is now ended.